Father of the House, Sir Peter Bottomley.
Mr. Speaker, the House will be grateful to know that the official opposition support what the government is trying to do, and I'd like to pay tribute, as she did and as my right honourable friend did, to the people in the all-party group who over the last 11 years have worked together, the Liberals, the Labour and the Conservatives, and no doubt others, to try to get to a situation where it's not possible for freeholders on purpose or by mistake to exploit residential leaseholders. When I first spoke on this type of issue about 11 years ago, I declared my interest as a leaseholder in my constituency with no problems whatsoever, and the 6 of us bought the freehold willingly from a willing seller, the person who developed the block of flats when he retired. I've since acquired an interest in another leasehold property. I don't take part in these debates to try to feather my own nest, because I try to make sure that the other 5 million people who are in a worse position than I am have as good experience as I have had. I would like to hope that during the committee stage, and especially in the House of Lords, the parts of the Law Commission recommendations which have not been incorporated in this bill will be put forward for decision by this House and by the other place. The 3 reports they produced in 2020 should be implemented in full, or else the government should have said when those reports came out what was wrong with the Law Commission proposals. Those who own freehold interests have known since Scotland abolished leasehold that this is a gravy train that's going to end. When the government came forward with the proposal that ground rent should not be more than 0.1% of the capital value, they knew that the value was not as high as some people were estimating. And when people start looking at what the discount rate is, where in the impact assessment, I think is about 3.5%, in fact, long-term debt for the government is now about 4.5%, and that again will reduce it. And I make the suggestion, which is also on the LKP website, that government can deal with any possible compensation by saying they will tax it at 45% or higher, which will make people trying to take judicial review or challenges to the government on human rights terms null and void, or at least not worth trying. While speaking, can I say to the government that when, after the Grenfell fire tragedy, when it became clear that up to £15 billion of remediation was needed, not just for cladding, but for other fire defects, that the only people who could eventually pay these costs by law would be the leaseholders who owned not a brick in the building. The people who ought to be paying are the insurers for those who were responsible, who are the designers, the architects, the builders, the developers, the subcontractors, the component manufacturers and the like, all of whom were insured. And I commend to this House that somehow in committee stage they write in that the potential claims by leaseholders can be gathered together into an agency who can together sue the insurance companies and those they insured to get a contribution from them which will reduce the cost both to leaseholders and reduce the cost to government, who have been providing a lot of money to try to make sure remediation has happened. In my thanks, I want to include Catherine O'Riordan, who's helped the Secretariat of the All-Party Group, who's worked remarkably well. And given that my involvement as an active campaigner on this came through a constituency case, I pay tribute to my senior caseworker, Colette Hanson, who over many, many years, over a decade, has helped support constituents facing awful problems, whether this or others. I could go on at length, and probably at some stage I will, but having made my preliminary remarks, I want to say to the House, this is the opportunity, before a general election, whoever wins it, to get legislation through which may be complicated in law but is not complicated in politics. Are we on the side of the people who've been at risk and those who've been not at risk but have also been exploited by some of the interests who've owned freeholds? I've given my list of shame in the past. I won't trouble the House with it now. But if people do have problems with their landlords or freeholders, tell your Member of Parliament, is my advice to them, and members of Parliament can actually bring it now to the committee or to the report stage. And I also suggest that those who do know that they've used expensive lawyers to screw residential leaseholders, use your money on something else. When a notable charity uses expensive lawyers to raise the cost of enfranchisement or extension of a lease by a third, an issue which should have come to Parliament rather than be done in the privacy of a senior upper property tribunal, you know that those running charities can get it wrong as well. We've left this too long. Let's now get on with it.
Chair of the Select Committee.